Rule 23 and 24, the line of the ball and the right of way. These two concepts are probably the most important two concepts in understanding the rules of the sport of polo. They're interrelated, they are not the same, but you can't have one without the other. So we'll try to explain this in the most simple of terms. First, the line of the ball. It is exactly what it sounds like. When a player hits the ball on his or her right side or offside, the path that the ball takes and the projected path that the ball is going to take forms what we call the line of the ball. If you have the line of the ball on your offside and you're traveling along and parallel to the line of the ball, then you will have what we call a right of way. And that's the right to move forward along the line of the ball unimpeded by other players. The right of way is a little more complicated than the line of the ball. The width of the right of way is from your left stirrup to your right stirrup, and it extends forward in front of your horse's face for a certain distance. The distance that the right of way extends in front of your horse's face, assuming that you're on the line and you have the right of way, is fluid and it's changeable, and it depends on the level of polo that you're playing. It depends on the relative speeds of you and the opposing player who wants to enter you right away, and it depends on the angle that that player wants to enter you right away. All these factors will affect how far your right of way will extend in front of your horse's face. First, we'll look at the level of polo. In the lower levels of polo, the right of way will extend further in front of your horse's face, and in the higher levels of polo, it'll shorten and not extend as far as the lower levels of polo. The relative speed of the players is related to the distance between the players. So, for example, if you have the right of way and you're moving forward with it, and a player wants to enter in front of you into your right of way, depending on how fast you're going relative to how fast the other player is going, there's going to be a distance between you, and we call it the gap between the players. And this gap is either closing, which means the distance between you and the opposing player is getting shorter, or the gap is opening, which means the distance between you and the other player is getting greater. So if the player who wants to enter in front of you into your right of way is going at a faster speed than you, we would say that his gap is opening, which means that there's less of a chance and less of a risk of a collision. Because remember, the original right-of-way rule says that you can enter the right-of-way of another player as long as there's not the slightest risk of collision. So the relative speeds of both players, the one that has the right-of-way and the one that wants to enter that right-of-way, is very important. Of course, as umpires, we need a baseline of basically how far this right-of-way extends. And I have it in the diagram here, fairly accurate. So let's just say we're talking about 12-goal polo, because that's pretty much the cutoff between the upper and lower levels. In 12-goal polo, your right-of-way should extend about 2 horse lengths or so in front of you. Now, if you're going fast at a full gallop, then that's going to be 3 or 4 horse lengths before somebody can enter in front of you right away safely. But that also depends on their speed. If they're matching your speed or their speed is increasing, it could be a little shorter. Now, in the upper levels of polo, say the 22 or 26 goal, that distance might be shorter and probably will be shorter. But it's going to be very dependent on the gap between the players. Is the gap opening or is it closing? Because that's going to determine your risk of collision. And if you're in, say, 4-goal polo, that right-of-way may extend 3 or 4 horse lengths at equal speeds. And then, of course, the gap, whether it's opening or closing, is going to largely determine if there's a risk of collision or not. So when the umpires are watching, they're determining who has the line of the ball by where the line of the ball is and where the players are located. and they determine very quickly who has the right of way. Then they watch the right of way in front of that player at least a couple of horse lengths up or more, depending on the speeds. And then if another player wants to enter in that right of way, the umpire makes a judgment based on the speed, the angle at which that player is coming in, the distance between the two players, and of course he already knows what level of polo he's in or she's in, and they'll make that determination. If there's even the slightest risk of collision, then it'll be a foul. So that's why you can never get a clear answer from any umpire on how far does your right of way extends, because the answer is it depends, and it depends on these factors. Now, with that being said, you can forget everything I just said just for a moment, because if you're going to make a play on a player who has the right of way, and you're not going to enter into their right of way, for example, you're coming in to make a near side back shot, or you're coming in to hook them, or you're going to bump them and ride them off. If that's the case and you never enter into their right of way, the right of way is not an issue. Oftentimes you'll come in to make a play, not entering their right of way, say a near side back shot, for example, and you make that play, but then after you hit the ball, your horse enters into their right of way. That's a foul. But we only call it if you enter into their right of way and it becomes dangerous. So you'll see a lot of near side back shots, and then the player comes over a little bit, and the player who had the line, had the right of way, always appeals for a foul and is upset because they say, well, he got in front of me a little bit. And that's true, and he did. But we allow a little bit because it's almost impossible not to. When we call that a foul is when, after the near side back shot, the player comes over too far and causes a dangerous situation. And that's called coming over after the shot. And you'll hear that one of the most common fouls that occurs. So another important concept is if you are the player that has the ball in the offside and you're hitting the ball, and you're largely in control of creating your own right of way because you're controlling where you're hitting the ball. So let's say you're hitting the ball and you're hitting it at another player. So you hit the ball at another player and that player's already there, and obviously they're in your right of way now. If you look at the diagram and you hit the ball towards them, they're probably going to be in your right of way. They're not fouling you. You have to allow them a reasonable amount of time to clear out of your right of way because they were already there. You brought the ball to them. You brought your right of way to them. And the time they're allowed to clear is a reasonable time based upon who that player is as far as skill level is concerned. So a 0-goal player may need a little more time to clear than a 10-goal player. And we account for that. If you do not allow that player a reasonable time to clear the right of way, then the foul will be on you, and it will likely be dangerous riding, which is usually accompanied by a yellow card. So it's not something you want to make a habit of doing. Players do this all the time in hopes of getting a whistle. And they get a whistle, and it's usually against them, and they don't understand why. So you need to let that player clear. Now, the player who was there when you hit the ball at them and is now in your right of way must clear, obviously, in a reasonable amount of time for their skill level, but they also must clear either to the left or to the right or the shortest route possible. They can't clear and put themselves in a better defensive position or pretend like they're clearing and say, I'm sorry, and raise their mallet, say, oh, I'm sorry, but stay in the way. That won't work. Then the foul will be on them for not clearing in a timely manner. You should also know that when you hear, it's your line, players will scream that all the time at each other. What they're actually saying is you're in a perfect position to get on the line of the ball, so it's to your right, and capture the right of way. That's what they really mean by it's your line. It's a bit of a misconception, but you should know what that actually means. So to put everything in very simple terms, if you're planning on entering the right of way of another player, then you need to consider speed, angle, distance, and level of polo. Well, you know the level of polo you're in before you even get on the field. So think of it this way. The more speed you have, the less angle in which you enter the right of way, and the more distance you have between you and the player who has the right of way, the less chance you have of fouling. So that basically is the relationship between the line of the ball and the right-of-way. Now, with that being said, the right-of-way and the line of the ball can change quickly with a back shot, a 2-foot shot that would change the line of the ball and change the right-of-way. When a quick line change occurs, obviously the player who wants to pick it up has to allow players to clear the old right-of-way that was on the old line. It's just a safety thing. Everybody should be aware of that already. A question that we get a lot is, how far does the ball need to be hit to create a new line? The technical answer is probably 1 inch, half an inch, a millimeter. The practical answer is it just needs to be hit far enough for the umpire to see that the line changed, and with it, the right-of-way will also change. At this time, I want to encourage you to click on all the examples of right-of-way violations that you'll see underneath this video link, because there's a variety of plays and a variety of misconceptions, and we have a lot of examples of all different kinds of right-of-way situations and line changes and spacing and speeds. So please take advantage of this page, because it's probably the most important one and the most difficult one to learn. So watch all the videos, and if you have any questions from those videos, do yourself and all of us a favor and ask your USPA umpire. They're more than happy to explain and answer. That is line of the ball and right-of-way.